Recently, I talked on MTG Salvation Forum about why Classic Zoo is dead. And it's been a long time coming for me to say this, as much as I wish I didn't have to. But Classic Zoo, as we know it, with Kird Apes and Loam Lions and Step Lynxes, whatnot, these guys, it's not a thing anymore. And there's a simple reason as to why it's not a thing anymore. In Legacy, they were more powerful because pretty much everyone was only playing one drops. Therefore, in context of playing one drops, these were more powerful. But in Modern, people usually play 2 converted mana cost, 3 converted mana cost, sometimes upwards to 4 converted mana cost in power level, and they sort of shrink down because of that. So they're not as good, and that's why things like Noble Hierarch is better, because it can still beat down, it can still help beat down, with its exalted, but it also allows you to get up to that 3 converted mana cost quicker in the earlier game. Therefore, you're a better aggro deck. The truth of the matter is that's not the only reason why it's bad. Modern also really lacks, and this is just sort of, again, if you want to read any of this, I have a huge write-up on it. You can go to the MTG Salvation forums with Modern and you'll see it. Modern lacks, and this is just a problem with Modern in general, and I'm not going to say it's a good problem. Modern lacks a lot of answer cards. Unlike Legacy, which has a lot of main deckable cards that can answer a plethora of things. Think of Force of Will, but on a less broad extent. You've also got stuff like Stifle, Daze, and not just counter spells. You also have Price Progress for greedy mana bases. You've got off the top of my head, Back to Basics for greedy mana base. Also Wastelands for just general purposes. You've got a lot more answer cards in Legacy than you do in Modern. Modern has very few answer cards. Just off the top of my head, you can get answers in the form of what, like Abrupt Decay, discard, counter spells. I mean, Mana Leak and while people want stronger counter spells, Mana Leak and Remand are still exist and still do a function. But you've got a lot less main deckable answer stuff, but you do still have some, like Wasali Pride Mage, and look, Kolaghan's Command has basically birthed a control deck finally, because it is main deck hateable. That's the point, is that Modern has this thing where it's got a million decks trying to attack at different angles, because you can only put so many sideboard cards in your deck. That's the real truth of it. Modern is a sideboard format. If you don't have the right sideboard cards for the cards that for the decks that you're going to see, you will lose. And if you manage to put the right sideboard cards in and you see them, and it doesn't even matter if they were the right sideboard cards for the event, as long as you see them for the stuff that you're playing against, you'll win. Now, here's a crazy statistic as well. 60 to 70% of the Modern metagame is sort of the established tier 1, tier 2 decks. That's crazy, because that means 30 to 40% of the metagame is random decks. And those random decks will kick your butt if you can't beat them, and you can't beat them unless you have just weird main deckable hate against them. And that's something that the Classic Zoo, aka you're running with 12 1-drop beaters, a couple, about 6 to 10 2 to 3 drop beaters, and then you've got 4 bolts, 4 Path to Exiles, and your other cards are maybe Jermaka's Command. For what it's worth, Jermaka's Command is probably the only reason I was able to force Small Zoo in any capacity. Not, I shouldn't say Small Zoo, Classic Zoo with Kird Apes and Loam Lions and stuff for a while, because Jermaka's Command is ridiculously good. But I give you the alternative to this. We're in an era where you gotta win on the 4th turn, and if you don't win on the 4th turn, you will lose, because even decks like Delver like stabilize on turn 4, and you can't come back from that. You'll lose, as they'll be at like you know, 5 life or whatever, and then they'll just come back after that. So you need to not only win on the 4th turn, you can't, but it's not even like barely win, like, oh, I beat you by 2 points. You need to, like, by 5 points, by 8 points. You need to overwhelmingly win. Now, you could be doing stupid, crazy suicide zoo or whatever they're calling it with Death Shadow, but that's basically just a bad boggles. It really is a bad boggles. Play boggles if you're going to do that. This is a little bit different. This is a blend of red deck wins and zoo, really. And it's sort of like if you liked small zoo, if you liked Gruul Zoo, which, by the way, Gruul Zoo can't exist either because you don't overwhelmingly win on the 4th turn. You just kind of win on the 4th turn, and if they stabilize, you're screwed. This at least gets you back in the game. This is a deck that runs, it's still sort of Zoo in the fact that at the end of the day, it's 20 creatures, 20 burn spells, 20 lands. Now, some of these stuff can act as both, like Eidolon the Great Revel can act as both. Goreclan can sort of act as a burn spell. But at the end of the day, that's what they're there for. This is the closest I can get to classic Zoo feel, and it's not running exactly the quote-unquote classic Zoo. I've got it spread out in curve because that's a little easier to see, but just to highlight the creatures: Goblin Guides, Monastery Swiftspears, Wild Noctills, Eidolon the Great Revel, Goreclan, who's a burn spell sometimes he's a creature. He's a little bit of both, plays a little bit of both. And Hooting Mandrills is actually really good in this deck. You know, it's not a 5/5 zombie fish, which is a little sad, but it does the job. Not to mention, I mean, he's great with the Darkest Command. And he's also good with Rampager. But I guess Rampager's pretty much good with anything. Anyways, I digress. This is the deck. It can either play the very Zoo game of burn all your creatures and swing with mine, if it needs to. Otherwise, it can play the game of red deck wins, where it just says, alright, my creatures are coming in for sources of damage, I don't care if they live or not, and I'm just going to finish you off with burn spells. It has the ability to do both, which is why it's good. A lot of pros have actually been playing this online, although it's not getting very much recognition right now. And the reason why is pretty simple. It actually fills a lot of the holes that burn lacks in. Unlike if you were to side in Core Firewalker, which is still good against this deck, don't get me wrong. You still have options to beat it with things like Wild Noctill, Hooting Mandrills, Goreclan Rampagering over the Core Firewalker. The sideboard is pretty loosey-goosey. But I think this is probably a fine sideboard, to be honest with you. The Lightning Helix can probably be something better, like a Deflecting Palm. I don't actually have any Deflecting Palms. But, yeah, this is the sideboard. Might actually be better to be even a Searing Blood. But, you know, who knows. This is what I would want you to play if you're going to play smaller Zoo. Now, if you're going to play bigger Zoo, I think you've got the options of two things. You've either got Tribal, which turns out actually is still alright. This sideboard is a wreck. Don't actually take my sideboard as what it needs to be. There should also be, I'm sure, like at least 1 or 2 Snapcasters in here. Maybe cutting a Pride Mage for a Snapcaster. Maybe cutting in Infenza for a Snapcaster, because Snapcasting back Collected Company is ridiculously gross. But this deck, if you want to be really greedy, is sort of where you want to go at. What I would suggest is changing the sideboard to be creatures that you can get off Collected Company that will win the game on the spot in certain matchups. So, like, Reclamation Sage is actually a pretty good one. Also, Looming Shaman is something that I've been testing with pretty good results. It's a little piece of hidden tech that most people forget about. But I'm sure there's black creatures in there. There's more black and blue hate stuff that I just haven't looked at. So this is where you want to be at. The cool thing with Anafenza and the Mana Dorks is actually you can put the 1/1 counters on Mana Dorks because they tap for mana, so you can safely do it. But yeah, Anafenza is pretty good right now, especially against that Meller Collected Company deck that's running around. I just fill off because I don't want a million legendary creatures. I fill it off with Neither Orcrey. And I haven't really tested this one out. I can't really suggest it, but for the Big Zoo, the one that I have tested out, I can tell you is good. And Big Zoo's a lie, by the way. It's not even Big Zoo. This is your classic zoo. The only difference is it's a little higher mana curved, and it runs Collected Company. That's really, like, without Collected Company, if you didn't look at Collected Company, this would look like a small zoo. That's what it is. It is a small zoo. I'm not even going to pretend that it's that's a big zoo. It runs better main deckable wide answers. I told you that Modern doesn't have very many main decked answers to things. Well, it does have a few, and if you run them, Path to Exile and Bolt being one of them. The other ones are Pride Mage. Pride Mage actually does a lot of hate against the everything. Smiter's pretty main deckable, hate against tempo and control. It's not, I wouldn't call it like super hate, because it doesn't hate in the same way that Pride Mage does. Neither Orcrey, actually, I would consider it hate, because what I get off of it, aside from a gigantic beater, is this, and this is basically my mana base. I've got Kessig Wolf Run for all the weird sort of aggro decks that or chump blocker decks that you need to roll over, as well as the 1-for-1 removal decks, because Kessig Wolf Run turns things like Noble Heirach into a huge beater. Also, Stirring Wildwood would be my choice to also put in there, because I've used it several times against the 1-for-1 removal decks or the Cryptic Command decks to pop him out there and then swing with him instead of the whole team and still win. Stirring Wildwood gets my nod simply because it taps for mana, but the other choice that you have is Ghost Quarter. Ghost Quarter is also a very, very, very valid choice against... do I not actually have any Ghost Quarters? Huh, I didn't think that I did. Well, I guess I'm going to have to get some Ghost Quarters. Anyways, Ghost Quarter is a valid choice as well, that I know some people use if they're going to face more of a meta of Tron, which online I just haven't really seen it all that much. But Collected Company is also a main deckable hate card, and it's hard for me to say hate, because hate makes it seem like I'm siding it in specifically against something, but it's more like it's just answer cards. These people in Modern are posing many threats, many questionable threats, and you have to answer them or you lose, and that's what they're going after. That's the proactive thing of Modern. I mean, look at Living Twin. You know, like that is the accumulation of just what Modern is right now. It is a format where they go, all right, I'm just gonna show these things to you, and if you deal with them, I lose the game, and if you don't, I'm just easily gonna win the game. So Collected Company exists in that route too. Most main deck game one, it's mostly a Pride Mage, but I think you really do need to be all in on the Collected Company plan here. Aethersworn Canonist, Cataxes, Core Firewalkers, Thalias, Looming Shaman, Scavenging Ooze, Magnus of the Moon. Legitimately, if you want to look at how many non-creature spells I have here, it's not very many. Boom, we're done. that's how many non-creature spells I've got in my sideboard. I have 12 creature spells and then a couple that I need to fill in the gaps. I think one of Stony Silence is perfectly fine. Comes in against a lot of variety of decks. It's there for filling things. Bonfire of the Damned, again, also comes in variety of decks. So I gotta sort of just do it as one of that fills off my hate of putting like creature kill. Dramarka's Command, if you have not tried it yet, is so good. It's so good. It's the only reason that you could run Small Zoo in any form or capacity right now, is because it's so good. I'm forcing 2 copies in here, and I haven't looked back since. It is that good. It's just, I've never had a game where it's been bad in my hand. So getting one more on the sideboard just to fill out stuff. Sometimes I want to pull out Path and bring in, or pull out Bolt and bring in Dramarka's Command. Pull out Pride Mage, bring in Dramarka's Command. So this is sort of like what I'm saying for the main deck cards. I've been going on too long about these 2 decks, but what my plan here is I'm gonna mash 4 different rounds on each deck, just because I've been having a high win percentage with both, and see which happens to be better for the metagame. All right, Let's just do those 4 in the blind.